Navigating trades involving self-represented parties can seem daunting, but mastering the complexities of these types of deals is crucial for protecting yourself from potential legal and ethical issues. This video will equip you with knowledge to confidently handle transactions involving self-represented parties, minimizing your risk and ensuring smoother, compliant deals. In this video, we'll define a self-represented party under TRESA, clarify when and how you can work with a self-represented party, discuss required disclosures, and demonstrate how to complete specific forms to ensure compliance and remuneration. Let's get into it. A self-represented party with respect to a trade in real estate is someone who is not a client of a brokerage. This means they are representing their own interests in the trade and they are not receiving any services under an agreement with the brokerage. There are two instances where you could encounter a self-represented party. When you are representing a buyer and your buyer wants to purchase a home that's for sale by owner, meaning the seller is a self-represented party, or when you are the listing agent and a self-represented party wants to purchase your client's property. Whether the self-represented party is a buyer or a seller, you must remember that under TRESA, you are not permitted to provide assistance to a self-represented party unless it is in service to your client, in the best interests of your client, and consistent with your client's instructions. This means that you cannot provide services, opinions, or advice to a self-represented party, and you must make it clear that you are representing your client and not the self-represented party. For example, if you're the listing agent and a self-represented party calls to inquire about the property, you can provide basic information as long as it is in service to your client, as long as the self-represented party is aware that you are representing your client's best interests, and as long as you're not providing any opinions or advice. Now that you understand what a self-represented party is, when you may encounter one, and the limitations on your interactions with the self-represented party, let's look at how you can effectively fulfill your obligations. Firstly, let's look at the RICO guide. In deals involving a self-represented party, you must provide a copy of the RICO guide to both your client and the self-represented party. This might seem counterintuitive, but it's important that the self-represented party understands the risks of representing themselves. So if you're a listing agent, obviously you would provide the RICO guide to your own client before you list their property or provide any services to them. But if a self-represented party reaches out to you about that property, then you would also need to provide a copy of the RICO guide when they reach out to you. And then also when they place an offer on the property, send the RICO guide again and ask them to initial it and send it back to you. And again, if you're the buyer's agent, obviously you would provide the RICO guide to your own client during your first meeting before any showing or before providing any service to your client. Then, if your client is interested in purchasing a property from a self-represented party, then you would also need to provide a copy of the RICO guide to the seller, the self-represented party, when you first reach out to them. And then you would provide it again when you place an offer and you would ask the seller to sign it and send it back to you. In addition to the RICO guide, you also need to provide the information and disclosure to self-represented party. This form only goes to the self-represented party, not your client. And this form clearly explains that there are significant risks to representing oneself in a real estate transaction. It also clearly explains that you do not represent the self-represented party's best interests, and any assistance you provide them will be in benefit of your clients. Any information, including confidential information that they share with you, will be shared with your client as part of your duties to your client. Finally, it explicitly states that they understand that this does not constitute a contract or agreement for services or assistance. Providing this form not only informs the self-represented party, but it also protects you as well. You should provide this form along with the RICO guide when you first speak with the self-represented party, and then send it again at the time of offer and ask them to sign it as a best practice. Now, in addition to the RICO guide and disclosure form, there are a couple of key items to note when completing deal paperwork for a transaction involving a self-represented party. First, let's consider the case where you are the listing agent and a self-represented party is placing an offer on your client's property. In this case, it's pretty simple. You just need to complete the confirmation of cooperation and representation form. And in section 1, seller brokerage, you need to check off item A, where it says the seller brokerage or a designated representative of the seller brokerage represents the interests of the seller in this transaction. Then select option 2. The seller brokerage or a designated representative of the seller brokerage is providing assistance to the buyer, and the buyer is a self-represented party. Now let's look at the scenario where you are acting as the buyer's agent and your client is placing an offer on a property listed as for sale by owner, a FSBO. In this situation, your commission isn't guaranteed by a listing agreement. Therefore, in addition to your declaration on the confirmation of cooperation form, you must outline your remuneration by completing a commission agreement form. This step is vital to ensure that you're properly compensated for your services. Let's start with the confirmation of cooperation form. This is where you'll establish the relationship dynamics. And you'll start by checking box 3B, which states the brokerage or a designated representative of the brokerage represents the buyer, and the brokerage will be paid according to the commission agreement entered into between the buyer and the seller. Then in the initial section, ensure that your buyer initials the buyer bubble, you initial the cooperating buyer's agent bubble, and the seller initials the seller bubble. And since there is no listing brokerage, you just leave the seller brokerage bubble blank. Then under brokerage details, fill out your brokerage details in the cooperating brokerage section and leave the listing brokerage section blank. Now remember, this form outlines your working relationship with the parties, but it doesn't discuss your compensation. So next, you need to lock in your pay using a commission agreement form. This form is your contract with the seller, confirming that they agreed to pay your fee. First, you would fill out the buyer and seller names, the property address, and your brokerage information, and then you would define your commission. So enter the agreed upon amount. You can use a percentage, for example, 2.5% of the sale price, or you could use a flat fee amount. Pick one or the other. Don't leave both blank or don't enter conflicting figures. Just enter either a percentage or a flat fee. And finally, ensure all parties sign and date the bottom of the form to make it legally binding. Finally, now that we understand the paperwork requirements, let's talk a moment about the deposit, specifically in cases when you are working with a self-represented seller. In this case, make sure that you never place the deposit with the seller directly. The deposit must be placed in trust with a lawyer or placed in Zolo's trust account. This is extremely important to protect your client because trusts are protected. Once placed in trust, the funds will not be released for any reason except for the purpose of the deal as per the agreed upon terms. If you place the deposit with the seller directly, you're opening your client up to a huge risk. The seller could spend the money or go bankrupt, the deal could fall through, etc., and the money could be lost. But once placed in trust, your client's funds are protected. Okay, so now let's sum up what we talked about. When working on a deal that involves a self-represented party, make sure to provide and obtain signatures on the RICO guide and the information and disclosure to self-represented party form, and to explain to the self-represented party that it is your job to represent your client. Make sure not to provide any services that could create an implied representation agreement, and always act in service of your client only. For paperwork, complete the confirmation of cooperation form, selecting the appropriate checkbox depending on what type of client you're representing. And for self-represented sellers, complete the commission agreement form. And finally, never place the deposit with a self-represented seller directly. Always place it in trust. By following these guidelines, you can protect yourself, provide the best service to your client, and stay compliant under TRESA. Happy selling!